The sun cast a golden glow over Greenhaven Estates, a picturesque suburban neighborhood with manicured lawns, picket fences, and an unspoken divide. Jason Carter had never felt truly at home here. He had moved in 5 years ago, hoping to build a future for his family. As one of the only black homeowners in a predominantly white neighborhood, he knew he had to work twice as hard to be accepted. So he kept his head down, paid his dues to the HOA, and stayed out of trouble. But trouble had a way of finding him. His 3-acre property sat at the edge of the community, backed by a stretch of undeveloped land. A perfect, peaceful retreat until the drilling started. At first, it was just a distant hum. He'd wake up, hear the sound, and assume it was some new construction project. But then, he found small holes peppering the back corner of his land, perfectly round. Deep, he frowned as he crouched near one. Fresh dirt surrounded it, the scent of disturbed earth filling the air. He ran his fingers along the rim. The precision of the hole unsettled him. It wasn't a random accident. Someone had done this deliberately. Jason stood, surveying the area. His neighbors, mostly older white retirees, barely acknowledged him most days. He doubted any of them would be out here digging. But the sound of drills, faint but persistent, carried through the air every morning. "Dad, what are you looking at?" Jason turned to see his 12-year-old daughter, Layla, standing on the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her dark curls bounced as she tilted her head. "Just something strange, baby girl," he said, forcing a smile. "You go finish up your homework. I'll be inside soon." She nodded and went back inside. Jason's smile faded. He didn't like this. Not one bit. The next morning, he set out early, coffee in hand, determined to catch whoever was behind this. He walked the perimeter of his property, scanning the ground. The holes had multiplied overnight. More of them, deeper this time. His stomach tightened. This wasn't kids playing a prank. This was something bigger. He marched to the HOA office, housed in a pristine white building at the community center. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with tight blonde curls and a permanent frown, barely glanced at him. "I need to speak to someone about unauthorized drilling on my property," Jason said, keeping his voice even. She sighed, flipping through a file. "Mr. Carter, is it? You'll have to submit a complaint in writing. The HOA board will review it at next month's meeting." Jason clenched his jaw. "I don't have a month. Someone is digging on my land now." A voice cut in from behind him. "Mr. Carter, you should really be more patient." Jason turned to see Richard Langley, the HOA president, strolling toward him. A tall, wiry man with slick-back silver hair. Richard had a way of speaking that always felt condescending, even when he was smiling. "We have a process for these kind of concerns," Richard continued. "I suggest you follow it." Jason stared at him. "I suggest you tell me what the hell is going on." Richard's smile tightened. Now, no need for hostility. If something is happening on your property, I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." Jason took a step closer. "Then give it to me." Richard glanced at the receptionist, then back at Jason. "I'll look into it." Jason didn't believe him. Not for a second. That night, he stayed up, watching from his back porch. The air was thick with humidity, the faint scent of pine and damp earth surrounding him. The neighborhood was silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant bark of a dog. His eyes, sharp as suspicion, scanned the far end of his property, where the land dipped into a small clearing. Then, just past midnight, it started again. At first, it was a low mechanical hum, barely audible over the chirping of crickets. Then came the rhythmic thudding, metal-piercing earth. The sound made his skin crawl. It was methodical, practiced. Whoever they were, they knew exactly what they were doing. Jason leaned forward, gripping the railing of his porch. His breath slowed, his pulse quickened. Shadows flickered against the trees, distorted by moving beams of light. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4. Men in dark clothing, their faces obscured by the night. They moved with precision, working together as if they had done this many times before. One man knelt, positioning a drill against the ground. Another held a flashlight steady, its beam cutting through the darkness like a surgical instrument. The third man carried a bag, heavy from the way his posture strained under its weight. The fourth, he stood slightly apart, his stance authoritative, overseeing the work. Jason's fists clenched. His instinct screamed at him to do something, to storm down there and demand answers. But he knew better. He was outnumbered, and he had no proof. Yet, he needed to be smart. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his phone. He tapped open the camera, adjusting the zoom. The grainy night vision mode kicked in, and the figures became clearer. He started recording. The drilling intensified. Dirt sprayed up in bursts as the machine dug deeper into the ground. One of the men wiped his brow, muttering something Jason couldn't hear. Then, the overseer, the fourth man, stepped close to the hole, gesturing with authority. His voice carried just enough for Jason to catch a few words. Make it deeper. We need more volume. Jason's stomach turned. More volume? For what? The flashlight beam shifted, illuminating the side of the man's face for a split second. Jason's breath caught in his throat. Richard Langley. Jason nearly dropped his phone. His jaw tightened as anger surged through him. The smug, condescending HOA president wasn't just aware of what was happening. He was orchestrating it. Jason forced himself to remain still. He wanted to charge down there, to grab Richard by the collar and demand an explanation. But he needed more than his own fury. He needed undeniable proof. As he kept filming, one of the workers straightened and turned toward Richard. "We shouldn't be doing this in one go," the man said, his voice hushed but urgent. "If the owner wakes up—" "He won't," Richard interrupted, his voice dripping with arrogance. "He's not smart enough to figure it out. Just get it done." Jason's grip tightened around his phone. His vision blurred at the edges. But he forced himself to focus. The video was still rolling. He needed every second of this. Another burst of dirt shot into the air as the drill went deeper. The men worked in tense silence, their movements deliberate. Then Richard checked his watch and gave a curt nod. "Wrap it up. We'll come back tomorrow night." Jason exhaled slowly. He had seen enough. He shut off the recording, backed away from the railing, and slipped inside, locking the door behind him. His mind raced. He had the proof he needed. Now, he just had to figure out what to do with it. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, Jason drove into town to pick up some supplies. If the HOA wasn't going to do anything, he would take matters into his own hands. He bought security cameras, motion-activated floodlights, and a few sturdy locks for his gates. If they wanted to trespass again, they'd have to work a lot harder for it. On the way back, he passed a group of HOA board members chatting outside the community center. Richard Langley was among them, laughing with another board member, Susan Whitaker, a woman known for her razor-sharp tongue and cold glares. Jason slowed at a stop sign, just in time to catch a fragment of their conversation. "Not like he even belongs here," Susan was saying, shaking her head. "He should be grateful we even let him buy in." Jason's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Richard chuckled but didn't argue. His silence was agreement. Jason exhaled slowly, keeping his expression neutral as he drove past. He knew they had never truly accepted him. But this was something more. This wasn't just passive aggression. This was calculated, deliberate. By the time he got home, his mind was racing. He wasted no time setting up the cameras, carefully angling them to cover every vulnerable point on his property. He positioned the floodlights strategically, ensuring they would blind anyone who triggered the motion sensors. He tested everything twice, then sat back, staring at his phone screen, waiting. Hours passed. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of the trees outside. His coffee had long gone cold, but he didn't dare leave his spot. The weight of exhaustion pressed against him, but he refused to sleep. He needed to be awake when they came. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the motion sensor alert buzzed on his phone. Jason bolted upright, heart hammering. He grabbed his phone and opened the live feed. There they were, 4 men in work boots and dark jackets, drilling into the earth like it belonged to them. But this time they weren't alone. Richard Langley stood among them, arms crossed, nodding in approval as they worked. Jason's blood ran cold. This wasn't just trespassing. This wasn't just an HOA dispute. This was organized. This was sanctioned. And it was personal. Jason gritted his teeth as anger coursed through him. His fingers tightened around the phone. He zoomed in, recording everything. The way Richard's lips curled into a smug smirk. The way the men worked with quiet efficiency, as if they had no fear of consequences. They didn't think anyone would stop them. They didn't think Jason had the power to fight back. But they were wrong. He was done being polite. He was done waiting for justice to come on its own. They wanted to fight. They were about to get one. By the time the county inspector arrived, backed by a news crew Jason had tipped off, Richard was already scrambling. The footage was damning. The drilling? A scheme to tap into Jason's land's natural water reserve, diverting it to certain homeowners while leaving his property vulnerable to sinkholes. The scandal erupted. Richard was ousted from the HOA, fined heavily, and placed under legal investigation for property violations. But the fallout didn't stop there. As the news story spread, neighbors who had ignored Jason's concerns suddenly found their voices. Angry homeowners confronted Richard in the streets, demanding answers. Lawsuits were filed. The HOA board, once smug and untouchable, was now fractured, its members turning on each other to avoid liability. Jason, however, wasn't done. With legal backing, he had a full geological survey conducted on his land. The results confirmed his worst fears. Years of unauthorized drilling had weakened the foundation beneath his property. Had he not stopped them, his home could have collapsed within a decade. Fueled by righteous anger, Jason took the battle to courts. He filed for damages, and with the overwhelming evidence in his favor, the ruling came swiftly. The HOA was ordered to pay a hefty settlement, forcing many of its wealthier members to sell their properties to cover the costs. Some moved away in disgrace. Others stayed but kept their heads down, no longer daring to challenge Jason's presence in the community. But justice wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure no one could ever pull the same stunt again. Jason cemented every hole on his land, ensuring no one could take from him again. But he didn't stop there. He installed reinforced fencing, planted thick hedgerows, and put up signs making it clear that trespassers would be prosecuted. He was no longer the quiet man on the corner lot. He was the man who fought back. The news coverage spread further than he expected. Other homeowners across the country, dealing with corrupt HOAs, reached out to him. Some asked for advice. Others simply wanted to share their own horror stories. Jason found himself at the center of a movement, a pushback against HOA overreach and abuse of power. He gave interviews, testified in a local government hearing about HOA reform, and even started a blog detailing everything he had been through. Meanwhile, Richard Langley's downfall was swift. His desperate attempts to save himself backfired spectacularly. He tried to pin the blame on the construction crews, but the paper trail led straight back to him. When that failed, he attempted to spin the narrative as a misunderstanding, until audio recordings surfaced of him making discriminatory remarks about Jason. The public outrage was immediate. His reputation was in ruins. He lost his position in the HOA, then his job, and soon after, his home. His name became synonymous with greed and corruption. The HOA itself crumbled under the weight of lawsuits. Facing mounting legal fees in a community that no longer trusted them, the remaining board members resigned. A new, fairer leadership took over, and for the first time in years, homeowners felt they had a say in how their neighborhood was run. Policies were rewritten, transparency became a priority, and mandatory inspections ensured that no one could abuse power the way Richard had. Jason, for his part, finally found the peace he had been searching for. No more whispered comments behind his back. No more anonymous complaints about his presence. He had fought for his land, for his rights, and won. One evening, he stood on his porch, sipping a cold drink, watching the sunset over the now quiet neighborhood. The weight that had pressed on his shoulders for so long was gone. The battle had been exhausting, but worth every second. He had started as an outsider. They had tried to take what was his, believing he would roll over and accept it. They were wrong. And now, they would never forget it.